So let's dive in. In looking at how these themes are fitting together, remember, we have to remember, go back to type. Because if you're looking at type, then you're going to see the way that we generally describe connections, electromagnetics. As we're going into this now, I want you to know the general theme, generator with generator, projector with projector, maybe even projector with generator, because their auras are, one's porous and one's designed to penetrate and be conditioned. So these are the ones who get really enmeshed with each other. So what Ra says is when you're looking at the relationships, the one in which connectivity is going to operate according to the way they're generally described is generator with generator, projector with projector, and projector with generator. So it doesn't mean that each of these types are going to experience it the same. Remember, they're very, very different. So you throw a rare manifestor or even rarer reflector into the mix, much more different. So how do we deal with that? We go back to the surface keynotes. What are the surface keynotes for the types? That's how we want to be able. Oh, Kutch, I'm just seeing your comment here. Yeah, no problem. If you want to turn in another one separate from our sample, that's completely fine. Okay. So in effect, the generator is going through all these kinds of connections with other people. They have no filter. They have no protection. Remember, porous, open, enveloping. No shield like the manifestor, no shield like the reflector. So what Ross says is that they're going to generate these thematics in the world that become the standard because that's almost 70% of the population. So it's always the case with the generator when it's dealing with the reflector or the manifestor in particular. You kind of find some of those. Ra had one of that kind of dynamic with his wife, is that they realize right away there's something wrong because they're not getting what they're giving. It just feels that way. Okay. This generator is not getting back what they're giving. And he says it just feels that way. And it's true. It's true from the auric point of view and the way in which the auras are designed to interact. So always keep that in mind. It's a challenge. Going back to what that's all about as a reminder that we're going to go into generalities with electromagnetic and compromise when you're analyzing. I even put it in the assignment notes. Remember what the types are. Okay, so that was just a little reminder. Now let's begin with electromagnetic. I think the electromagnetic is one that is overrated and perhaps misunderstood, says Ra. An electromagnetic connection is very interesting. That is, you have one partner who has one gate at one end, and you have another partner who has another gate at the other end. Remember, they're not halves. They are parts. And the moment they come together, now we have a quantum. We have mutual conditioning from either side. So that's the first thing to recognize with an electromagnetic. This is mutual conditioning. It's a new channel. It's a new thematic. It's a new relationship strength. Now, most people being not self, in the not self, attraction and repulsion, being very, I love you, I love you, I love you, I hate you, get the fuck away from me. That's what it can feel like if they're in aura too long. So your solution to too many electromagnetics, hi, it is a problem. My husband and I have 7. We're lucky enough not to have compromise, but we have 7. The solution to this challenge is to make sure that they experiment with sleeping alone. That's the first step, especially if they are, partners in, my mind wanted to say crime, in business. They're partners in business. They work together, they live together, they sleep together. They got a lot of electromagnetics. That's going to be a challenge. I can tell you from experience, it's a challenge. The more dissonant connections between those electromagnetics, the more challenging it is going to be. The more harmonic and resonant, The easier it's going to be at first, but it doesn't matter. It's still difference. It's still difference. And electromagnetics are sparky. They're the thing that hook you into, ooh, this is sexy. This is interesting. I like this guy. We're going to have great conversations. We're going to be aware. It's going to be fabulous. We'll be inspired together. We'll be certain together. We'll talk about the mysteries and come to rationalizations and be able to know things. How wonderful. But after some time with an electromagnetic, what happens is, why do you always come up with these rationalizations? Why can't I have those rationalizations? I'm the 61. My husband doesn't have a 24, but I'm just anthropomorphizing what the gate might show up like. What happens is the other person starts to take on, remember, mutual conditioning, and without awareness, thinks that that has to be theirs and is unhappy with the fact that it's always locked into their way, because their way is maybe fixed, especially if it's in a defined, center where we have a defined center, but we have a new channel. They have their own way that this is always going to show up, their own way that they're going to mutually condition each other. Sometimes if you spend too much time with each other, and you've got a lot of these going on in the body graph, you get sick of each other. Here's a different way of saying it. You get irritated. Irritation can show up like a frustration for generator, bitterness for the projector, anger for the manifestor. Now, disappointment, that's a different keyword now. With a reflector, remember, disappointment is about expectations of others not being connected, them not being connected to their lunar pattern, but expecting things from the other and being disappointed when it's not come to fruition. So now you know how to describe the generality of an electromagnetic. It's a mutual conditioning. It's not big, happy, smiley face. This is not ease. This is not necessarily glory. Ooh, it's sexy. Ooh, it's attractive. Ooh, it's interesting. But it's the thing that can also quickly burn out partners if they don't get enough space. Hope that was very clear. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor we're looking at here. Let me get my pen. Now what we're looking at is we're honing in on their electromagnetic channels. Here we have a channel of the alpha, leadership for good or bad. Here we have the channel of curiosity, design of a seeker and a searcher. Here we have the channel of discovery, succeeding where others fail, failing where others succeed. Channel of emoting, design of moodiness. Okay, so we have one logic, two abstract, and one individual. You can see from the thematics what more this couple is going to have to deal with in the energetics, not only the mutual conditioning of the gates on either side, but what does that do to the centers that they either have defined or not? What influence does it have? What does it create as an energetic between the two of them? You're looking at the relationship. You're looking at the newness, the sparkiness, the interest, the engagement. If you're looking at a love trait, which is often the case between romantic partnerships, here we have a 55, which is eternally indecisive love, wishy-washy, moody, fickle is another word for that. And then the 46 is love of the body. So the love of the body, the form, the temple, love, transcendent love, not just love of her body, but love of all forms and all bodies. Sorry, his body, because she's in green. So the whole thing about this electromagnetic dance is that this is really where opposites attract. Opposites attract in a channel. So Ra says everything about the electromagnetic is that it is a fundamental tension. Remember that word. Tension. Tension is a good word for this. It's tension. Okay. It's the thing that goes, ooh, oh my God, I'm attracted to this man. Okay. It's easy to say love and hate, but it's not normally that kind of extreme. We just say it that way so that you remember this is not just, ooh, sparky, sparky, I love you. Awesome. Because it's also dislike. You could say dislike. Okay. Tension between delicious and terrible. Tension. You know that tension when you first meet someone and you're attracted to them and you're kind of like on the edge of your seat and you don't know why? Like, oh my God, this guy's turning me on and I don't know what to do with myself. Sorry, my husband, I can remember 7 electromagnetics. It just takes one, my friends. One is enough to make a relationship interesting. You will find them. The ones that burn out quickly because they don't know any better, usually the ones that have lots of electromagnetics because they don't know what to do about the electromagnetics, to give them a break, like sleeping alone, like getting good with being alone and being in your own aura and doing your own thing and coming together, then the sparks fly again. You give the sparklers a rest. When you come back together, they light up. It's the most beautiful thing. It's the thing that will keep the attraction, the fire alive, ignited and alive if you give them breaks with the electromagnetic. So what Ross says is the very thing that attracts you to somebody is the very thing that ultimately is going to be offensive to you. It's just the way it is. It's this old line about familiarity breeding contempt. So we use that term, familiarity breeds contempt, with the 5th line. Now I want you to link electromagnetic to that tendency. Electromagnetics have impact in a relationship. They're the juicy, lighting up sparkiness, love, hate, like, dislike, what have you, delicious or terrible. And they breed contempt. Why are you always talking about your beliefs? And why do I have to argue my ideas with you? You see what I mean? So it's tension. It's not just yummy, yummy, happy-go-lucky. And that's the dismantlement of the illusion out on Facebook land. Electromagnetics have their downsides because an electromagnetic, as Ra says, the connection is always going back and forth in one way or another between this, wow, isn't that fascinating and wonderful, to, isn't that a terrible, horrible thing that I have to deal with all the time? Because now remember this, especially when we go into cycles analysis, electromagnetics are personal, okay? They're personal. You personally experience them. These are the things, I love our little animated sparklers, that spark the relationship. They spark them. And the sparkies will burn out and not be so sparky and not so joyous and not so happy. If they're together too often, too much, it's get out of my face when you've got a lot of these. Okay, I'm having fun with this because I know this one really well, having a lot of electromagnetics. So you see with Richard Burton, him being a reflector, what is the overarching theme we're going to be using? Sampling. He's going to be sampling her here. He is not going to have the same kind of dynamic. She, as a projector, can't necessarily get a grip or a hold on his aura in the same way that she could another projector or a generator, because it's not the same dynamic. The energy is different. He's got his own Teflon aura that samples. It's not designed to be heavily influenced by people so much as the transits, because the transit is where it's at for him, the lunar transit. So making decisions from her direction, her willpower, her emotional upset or not, we know that that would be death to his authoritative process, to his uniqueness, to his sovereignty. So we always come back to bringing them home to their truth, their authoritative process, describing it for them, reminding them of it. What do we do about these electromagnetics? I just hate it, you know, that she's so moody, or that I just hate it, she says, that he teases me and provokes me. Well, if you hate that they provoke you, maybe they're not the one for you. The attraction and repulsion, again, It has to be something that is given space and time. Both of these require time. One requires a lunar cycle, maybe multiple lunar cycles. This one requires the emotional wave, the tribal ratcheting, especially emotional wave. And she's got aspects of the other waves as well. So there's going to need to be time. We see this relationship right here, overarching keynote, patience. Yeah, space, time to honor each other's moods, to be aware of the uniqueness of the other person's effect on each other and on the relationship. So Ra says, now this is a really interesting thing. I've tried to describe it to you before. We're going to make sure that you really grasp this. You don't actually need an electromagnetic in your design for the sparking to take place. For example, if you have companionship in a hanging trait, remember last week we were talking about how they do have a hanging gate together, 36, 36, two different aspects, but it's a shared companionship, right? Two different life aspects, but it's still a trait that is activated or a dormant potential. So what happens is if you both have a companionship in a hanging gate and you meet each other on a night where a planet is activating that harmonic, guess what? We're going to have activation of that hanging gate, that dormant potential in his case, that active principle in her case. So you don't need the electromagnetic in the design for the spark to happen. They meet each other on a magic moonlit night. And now we have connection sparkiness because of the transit, So the fact of the matter is that there is an electromagnetic built into that moment, that spark, just a spark. And that spark is something that's really lovely when you think about it. So in other words, basically, this is the way the genes turn you on. They turn you on. They want something that is different. No other connection is so fundamentally rooted in genetic imperative than electromagnetic, because the electromagnetic literally finds the other opposite side missing piece, we could say, especially if that is a bridging trait. It's not in this case, but if it's a bridging trait, oh boy. Okay, so electromagnetic is the heart and core of what your genes want from you. They want you to be attracted to something that is really different, unique. Remember, being able to have strong genetic offspring, whether that be a baby or a business, a conversation, what have you. The genes are interested in what they're not. And so that's why we have electromagnetics. It creates strength in the relationship. It creates a new dynamic between the two partners. And they are locked into that dynamic. They have no choice. They can't change one of those planets. They can't change the lines. This is the relationship. This is the dynamic. This is the attraction repulsion. Okay. So with these two, we have the electromagnetic being important and exciting. This is a really, really good one to look for. Anytime you have an undefined solar plexus and you got a love gate hanging out there. Look, he's got two love gates, right? Or sorry, she's got two love gates. He's got that one, but he's looking for the other side. Love gates are really, really powerful for romantic partnership and relationship. Okay, because it brings what we think of as love, either our individual personal love or our transcendent love, the love gates of the G center. So Ra says we have an electromagnetic, and it's important to see that it's exciting because that's what it brings. But also at the same time, what makes it so difficult is the reaction is going to be on the other side of that electromagnetic field. The reaction. What is the reaction going to be? How is it going to show up? What is it activating or turned on? We know this relationship had issues. Look at that. Mars, second line, distrust. Pluto's, both of them, single-mindedness, the troubleshooter. Do we have a harmony or a resonance? We have harmony. So at least there's that as far as a compatibility of communion that may be more easeful than, let's say, if this was a 1 or a 4, because we know both those lines are not harmonic or resonant with the 5 and the 6. Okay. So it's exciting, but it's also difficult. Now, let me read a little quote from Ra. He says, for many years, because I began describing this as love and hate, the love took on a kind of quality as if this was the core of the relationship. It's not. So this very love-hate, even as a description, is not so much about loving and hating the partner as loving and hating an aspect of the partner. That's what the electromagnetic brings up. It brings up these aspects when you go from one moment in time being excited and appreciating it, and then over here is a good word, to resenting it and finding it annoying because it's in the way of a larger process. That's what the electromagnetic is. And I'm looking forward to hearing your perspectives on this at the end, because I'm curious if you'd ever looked at electromagnetic in this way. So let's look at a different partnership analysis here. We're taking a look back at Monica and Vincent. So here's Monica with her 4-6 manifestor design and Vincent with his 2-4 manifesting generator. So we know that there's a difference there. The single definition, 9 and 0, nowhere to go. 6 electromagnetic channels. If you recall, this was a relationship that lasted, I don't know, maybe 15 years or something like that. And then they split. Electromagnetic channels with the channel of awakening, a design of a commitment to higher principles. Also the channel of exploration, following one's own convictions. The channel of curiosity, seeker, searcher. Channel of acceptance, organizational being. Channel of money, materialists together. And the channel of abstraction, design of mental activity mixed with clarity. So we see there are 6 new thematics that this relationship is to this partnership. 6 new dynamics of like and dislike, or attraction and repulsion. So the electromagnetic makes sparkiness, but it's not the thing that's going to make your relationship work. This is the thing to get out of your head if you ever took on that misconception because of Facebook land. This is not what makes your relationship work, electromagnetic, okay? He says it's interesting and often a valuable thing that's in a relationship because despite the one side where one is tired of it and doesn't want it, it's still in terms of your genes. Remember, he's only talking about genes. It's still something very, very rewarding because it gives you precisely what the genes want you to get. And so what does it do? It sticks you into relationship with this partner. I can remember being in relationship with my husband. You know, we were together off and on for a really long time, living around or near each other. I could not move away every time he dumped me. And it was multiple times. I kept hanging around and confused as to why I was still hanging around waiting for him, you know, hoping, wishing, praying that he would come back and give me another chance. And then I saw my love gates, unconscious, are turned on by his connection with me. The genes want what is different. This is what sticks us, connects us, and sticks us in relationship. But it's not the thing that's going to make it work. We have to look elsewhere for that. Okay? It is a challenge. So a conundrum, it could be also, if you will, depending on the dynamics of what is connecting up with the other in this partnership. Here's the sparkiness, the places of potential challenge or upset. Now, they can bring beautiful things. They can be dynamic. Here, let's do a little bit of keynoting here with love gates. So I'm going to grab a pen. She is blue and he's green. So why does Monica love him? Well, with him, I feel as if I can follow my own convictions. I'm empowered to follow my own convictions. Vincent, with you, I feel as if I'm awakened to my higher self. Do you see that? Vincent, with you, I feel as if I have my power partner, the person who's I've met my match potentially. Potentially. Vincent, with you, we can be curious and we can be, making sense of things together. With you, my ideas might come into fruition and I can share what I'm really, pondering and believing about what happened in the past, the meaning, the reason, the sense making behind why life is so painful and futile. Vincent, with you, I feel as if I've found someone I can share answers with so that together, the process of acceptance of patterns and finding the facts to back up my opinions, it's just more engaging, enlightening, enlivening with you. Now, I am just anthropomorphizing, very general. I would go way more specific if I was looking at the line values and the planets, the life aspects, the themes. You know how to do that because you've already gone through a year of training. All right. So what is a hanging gate? Hanging gate is either a receptor to being conditioned by the other in a dormant potential, or it's active and it's on and it's still receptive on the other side of the channel to being conditioned by the other. So every time you look at your design, look at those hanging gates everywhere in your design, because those hanging gates are invitations from life to be conditioned by others. And the moment you have hanging gates at either end that each person is carrying, all of a sudden they meet each other in that channel. There's this fundamental dynamic at work. The glow happens. You complete me. This is it. Now, that has nothing to do with whether or not that thing really is it, can be it, or ever could be it. It's just the genes going, wow, terrific. Here we go. Opposite. The attraction is there. Let's investigate. Let's check this out. Let's play with this. So it's not necessarily the end all be all. It isn't. Okay. Now think about what happens when somebody comes, they don't have with that gate or a line. When they come together, they don't come with the gate or the line. That's an illusion. Okay. Here's the gate. And here's a gate. We actually have something that is grounding for Monica, her opinions. We have something that is his good fortune and good luck for Vincent, his thought processes, his expression of details, the I think voice. So you have to go all the way down to the base to get the difference. Look at that, they're the same base if their times are correct. Look at the tones, 3rd versus 4. Get the colors, 6 versus 5. Get the lines, they're both 4th lines. So even though they're both 4th line, this is a fully resonant channel. Down, when you go all the way down to the base, when you get to see that line that is fixing each of them, it's influenced by the base, then the tone, then the color, then out pops the line. Okay. So each of them are going to have a different experience in this dynamic. Together, how do those planets influence the other? Is there an influence? Is there a fixing? Sometimes there's a fixing. So you get one aspect of the line, exalted or detriment, one aspect of the line. So you do need to look at that spark, the sparkiness. What you're locking into is a very, very narrow point of imprinting, a narrow fixed line with a spark. Okay. So out of the 1,096 possibilities that are there, it says, out of a potential in that other gate, let alone the various combinations, planets that can activate, you're just getting one and you're locked into that one. And this is another reason why it can be repulsive, because that is not your way. You're being conditioned by the other person, and it's not yours. It's not your way. You're here to learn about all the ways if you're open there, all the ways, not just locked into that other person's way and taking on their way and thinking that you have to be that or that life is only like that. You're here to learn from a lot of different things, not just that one way. And that's why we get irritated. The genes get irritated. No, we want something different now. We're bored. We could say that very much with the abstract process, especially. Let's go find a new dynamic. Now, you're less likely to seek a new dynamic if you're undefined. So, electromagnetic compared to electromagnetic, not equal as far as the attractor field. Here, with Monica, his 62 is way more interesting to her 17. Why? Because we've got definition in his and she's got undefined. So he could take it or leave it, that 17. He could go off and find another 17 easier than she could drop his 62. Why? Because his 62 is already on. Do you see? This, especially as it's her earth. Aren't we attracted to people who define our sun earths? Have you noticed that pattern yet? We are really attracted to people with whom we can fulfill our life's work with. The dynamics of our life work, it coming alive, her getting her opinions grounded in that open or undefined Ajna. Really attractive. Whereas his 62, his Jupiter, he's already got his good fortune and good luck turned on. Don't need you, Monica. Do you see? This is a really important thing to grasp if you're wanting to, really get down to the nitty gritty of what's attracting. Remember, a lot of this is just for you. Not that you have to go and tell Monica, well, he's just more likely to leave you because you're not really doing anything for him here. That's not helpful, but it's helpful to understand the dynamics of why, isn't it? Especially in our own dynamics, our own relationships. It's so freeing to see the sparkiness and the things that are going on. So what Ross says is that when you see an electromagnetic, you hear people say it all the time. You see it on Facebook. Wow, we have 6, we have 7. Woohoo! For example, his younger son, they have 7 electromagnetic connections. Jiva is his name. But that's not necessarily something you want to ring up on the flagpole and broadcast as some great achievement. It's not, but you see that all the time on Facebook because actually it's very risky. It's a challenge. It's a problem sometimes, especially depending on the dynamic. So as much as we can be fascinated by each other, we can also get really bored to death by the same thing that we're meeting all the time. Alienated is another way of saying that, because all of what the electromagnetic is something that's fluctuating here and there. So in the end, what you recognize is that you're being locked into something that's not you, and the genes have had enough. Goodbye. Let's go find a different place to play, or just get some space so that we can go back to being ourselves, please. Yeah? Have you ever felt that? You're like, okay, done with this relationship at this moment. I need some alone time. Some people are going to need alone time way more than others. Some traits are going to prefer alone time way more than others. What are the alone time traits? 33, retreat. 40, gate of aloneness. The 12, yeah, I'm in the mood or not. So those especially are going to need alone time. You see somebody who's a hermit, you know that person's going to more likely like some alone time, right? Don't bother me. I'm busy. Leave me alone. Leave me alone, naturals, right? You know, if somebody's got a 1-4, this is aloneness as a medium of creativity, that they need alone time in order for their creativity to actually be influential, to be put out into the world. So remember those thematics. A prescription that is really helpful for people with a lot of electromagnetics, definitely alone time, which is way more emphasized if you've got aloneness traits, if you've got twos, fours, third lines, even bonds made and broken. Get out of the relationship, go to work, come back. Now the electromagnetics are happy again. Do you see what I mean? So space, creative ways of giving each other space. The biggest challenge I used to have was working with clients who are not necessarily very affluent and didn't have the sanctity of their own bedroom. Solution: at least a nap on the couch, at least a bath alone without any kids running around. You know, some quiet time, some sanctity, some solitude to get good with themselves again so that they can meet the other as themselves rather than being mutually conditioned and stuck and locked into something that is not them. Okay, so think about manifestor now. You have an electromagnetic connection with the manifestor. What does that really mean? This is closed and repelling aura. And one of the things we know about electromagnetism is that it is attraction repulsion. Okay, so now guess what? The electromagnetic, the way it works in a manifestor is that it moves them constantly towards the repulsion. The ones that you can't live with them and you can't live without them, that. Okay, they made all of that up. The manifestor. Can't live with them, can't live without them. Repulsion. Think about that in your relationship dynamic. So the way in which an electromagnetic is supposed to work, say a generator and a manifestor, they have a really sexy electromagnetic. What's sexy? Oh, anything that's connected up to the solar plexus. Do we have sexiness here? What's going on? Not an electromagnetic. We have two compromises. But let's just say this is pretty sexy. If you like power, if you like the dominance and control game, depends on what your color of your freak flag. But let's just say they have a sexy electromagnetic. Ooh, we like wealth together. We like to play in the world of the material way, or the ego, dominance and submission game, what have you. Okay, so you think when you look at this just from the surface, if you read a general ebook that hasn't been written by Ra Uru Hu, you think, oh, this is wonderful. You guys have a lot of sparks. How nice. As a matter of fact, the chances are that they're going to be very little sparking in the sense that these auras don't naturally work well together. They don't. Why? Because one's repulsion with the electromagnetics. So it's a different way that you describe it when you have different types. Now, in the mythology of just thinking about auras and types, if you think back to before 1781, generators were the manifestors' slaves. So their auras were never intended to fit together. Yeah, with the pawns and the king or queens, they didn't mix, did they? You either have slaves or slaves rise up and kill you. But it's not like y'all, rub shoulders, shake hands, decide to live happily ever after. There was a hierarchy, okay, hierarchical structure. Manifestors and generators don't have that kind of relationship, and they were never intended to have that kind of relationship. Direct quote from Ra. So remember, fireworks or not, heat or ice, like or dislike, to the extreme of love or hate. The spark keeps it going. Yeah, that keeps you coming back for more. Remember LaVeena, sitting on a house all alone, no family, no friends, waiting there for her lover to come back because of all of those 7 electromagnetic yummy sparks, and the sex was so damn good. Okay, it makes it really interesting. Spark keeps it going. You move back and forth from one side to the other. You are mutually conditioned. If you have one electromagnetic, that's enough. It's enough to make something interesting. When you have many, it becomes intense. It's intense. Harmonic conditioning means that the harmonic trait on the other side, we didn't say lines, we're just saying harmonic conditioning. So it's the trait gate on the other side. When we have this dynamic, especially with the projectors, what happens is they mutually condition each other so deeply, they don't know where one ends and the other begins. They take on the other person's role, their trait. That should be mine. I should have that because of the mutual conditioning that runs so deep. They don't know where boundaries lie. And this is where the heat comes. When we want the conditioning and we think that that is us and we behave as if their trait is ours, now we are so far removed from selfhood, it's ridiculous. We can't operate like that, not sustainably, not for long. Now, when we talk about line value, resonance, same line, harmony, harmonic line, this is where you're going to have energy that flows smoothly as long as you stay on your side of the sandbox. Okay, stay on your side. If there is a dissonant, line values that don't work together well, it's like two people singing and one person is standing on the other person's foot. It's friction, it's tension, it's not necessarily flowy. It's not the same dynamic. Now, it's very different. Electromagnetics that are very different initially. Ooh, wow, this guy's really different. I like him, you know? So that's where we got to be careful. So here Ross says, here we have electromagnetic. When you have one gate and the other gate is on the other side with the other person. So in other words, we could think of it as both people are missing an aspect of awareness, whatever that strength, that channel happens to be. And because we have these hanging gates, remember they're dormant potentials if it's in an undefined state. It's a conditioning receptor, isn't it? So then this 61 is always interested in 24s. And this 24 is always interested in 61s. These are the hooks that each of us have into our respective centers to learn about our respective centers. The hook, the automatic seeking, there's availability, there's reception. So when these two people meet and they're in each other's aura, what happens? We get electromagnetic, we get wiring. Think of it as temporary wiring between these two centers. It's both attraction. It is repulsion, manifestor or not, it's both. So what Ross says about this is that we live in a dualistic construct, the yin and the yang, the DNA, RNA. The electromagnetic is the attraction that pulls you to somebody. I remember to meet my husband, I woke up attraction and repulsion, and it never stays one or the other, never. It fluctuates, it goes back and forth. The thing that you thought was so sexy and so terrific, all of a sudden, nope, it's not there anymore. All right. Okay, let's continue. We're going to talk about compromise now. The compromise is really interesting too. It behaves at first as if it were electromagnetic. It behaves, it masquerades at first for one person as if it were an electromagnetic. So what Ross says is that love-hate is continually misconstrued as the key to going out of a relationship. You see, the only place where you can really know whether you're going to be able to stay or not is the compromise. Compromise isn't something that overtly bothers you. It takes time. It's that little thing that nags you after years, but the electromagnetic blows up in your face in a moment. So 6 months, if that person is day in, day out in that person's frequency, 6 months, if it's a sun-earth compromise and it happens to be the projector, I have tested and validated that one personally. I remember Ra telling me something to that effect at some point that I came across. So electromagnetic blows up in your face in a moment. Compromise, different story, takes time to see the challenge, to see the upset, to see the ramifications of it. So we can show them now with the tool you're about to learn, that place in the relationship where it can fall apart, fall to pieces, and what they can do about that in terms of the tools that we have, all the solutions that you can provide now that you're an analyst and you know how to analyze charts. So in the compromise, what we see is that we have definition, a new definition for one of the partners, a new definition in that channel, okay, in that channel. In this example, what we're looking at on the slide is that we have a new definition in the center as well. But what if this person already had one of these channels? Then it's still a compromise. It's still just as sticky, painful, irritating. Okay, irritating is one of the words you can use here. So obviously what you see here is we have a whole channel defined. Okay, and the other partner has a part, not a half. Use the word part of that channel defined, because the quantum of the two is not just 1 + 1 = 2. It's a third thing. So unfortunately, the law of the human design mechanics state that the one who has the channel is going to be the one who rules the roost, in Ra's words. And it's unfortunate, but this is just the way that it is. The fact that you may share an activation is one of the traits, one of the gates, those in that channel, simply leads to discomfort on the person who is being compromised. Okay. So it doesn't change any way in which the definition is going to operate. This person's definition does not, or activation, I should say, because it may not be a definition, but this person's trait or gate in relational context with that other, this person's sovereign self is not challenged or changed in any way by this person's trait. Now, it may be influenced. Let's say there's a planet there that is influencing one of the other planets into an exaltation or a detriment. Yes. But is it going to change the frequency, the way that this channel shows up as far as its experience, that person's experience of it? No. So the solution to this compromise, treat it like a dominance. That is the biggest solution. I gave you both my solutions right up front for electromagnetic and compromise. Here, treat it like a dominance. This person on the right-hand side needs to get their expression of their trait with someone else, a friend, a daughter, another lover. They happen to be quad split. You know, they are polygamists by design. It's not that this person on the left doesn't love the 24, the person with the 24. It's not that this person on the left doesn't respect the person on the right. It's just that it's like a horse with blinders. They can't see that person's trait necessarily. Now, what are some solutions? If you have people who are in human design in the experiment, I have had students, analysts no less, tell me that the challenge wasn't as bad if they were to ask. Now, granted, she's a projector, he's a generator. So the challenge on his part, if this was the generator, not as big of a deal, because compromise doesn't feel the same to a generator as it does for a projector. Projector, pain point, suffering, thorn in the side, what have you. It's painful. So what do? We let that person have their dynamic of what they are. We don't argue, we don't fuss, we don't fight. We allow this aspect of ourselves to get expressed with some other person in some other way. We don't try to force, hey, why don't you love me for my rationalizations? Why can't I, if this is Mercury, can't ever get in a word edgewise, right? Oh, there we go. Put the little horns. Now it's Mercury. Okay. So that's the solution. This is the way it operates with compromise. It is a challenge. It's painful. So let's go look at Princess Diana and Prince Charles together. Princess Di, a 1-3 projector. Prince Charles, a 4-6 generator. We have a split definition. I like to draw it right away so I can know where it is, find it. And we see we have 9 and 0, nowhere to go. So a very locked in relationship, which may feel kind of unsufferable for a third line projector who is getting compromised. Let's look at the five no less, compromised channels. Channel of logic, design of mental ease mixed with doubt. Princess Diana has the whole channel. Therefore, Charles is getting compromised. Channel of mutation, design of energy, which initiates, fluctuates, operates in a pulse. Prince Charles is. Therefore, Diana is getting compromised. We have the channel of perfected form, a design of survival for Prince Charles having the whole channel. Therefore, Diana is being compromised. Channel of structuring, design of individuality from genius to freak. We can see we have another compromise there for Diana. Channel of surrender, design of being a transmitter. We have Prince Charles with his channel there. So Diana gets another tick mark. That is 4 compromises for a projector. That is painful. That is her not being able to express herself in this relationship. That is her not being seen for who she is and what she can offer. That is her feeling the thorn in the side every time she tries to have expression of that trait. Because she is designed to penetrate deeply into the other person, absorb. Yeah, there's a potential to amplify. And what is she going to amplify? If this person, Charles, is frustrated, guess who's going to feel it really strongly? Frustration, amplified, not a pretty thing. This is actually locked down into, what is the word? Stuckness. Yeah, stagnation. Stuck. I feel limited. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. That's Princess Di, whatever activation that happens to be for her. So you see how it can be very painful, how quickly these challenges can show up. Great chart to pick, Katja, by the way, really, really great chart. So we can see in pictures, we can see what we have up here is her Venus being compromised. Ouch. Channel of structuring, individuality, freak for him, and her splitting apart, gate of assimilation for her. So compromise is a bitch, Ra's words. I personally too have experienced it. I know what this is like. Now just think about it. When you're at one of the channel, here's her Venus, my values, my mores, my relating, my standards in my relationship. And you don't have the other end. So you don't have the ability to, speak this other side insight. But then somebody comes in and they've got the whole channel. So all of a sudden, you don't have your voice. Your I know makes no difference to him. He doesn't care. He couldn't care less. He's a 4th line, rigid, fixed, one-track mind. And her 6 has no place there. So your genetic imperative, looking at the other end, she's like, I've got to have that. I really want that. It's precisely what I've always wanted. It's too bad when I get it. Sometimes I just can't hold on to it. That's the genetic imperative to get to the other side. And with him, she has no expression. So this is a relational wound as far as the challenge in the relationship. She feels unvalued, unloved when she tries to express her Venus because he's got a one-track mind and he won't be able to see or know what she's talking about. He's got his own knowing. Now that's a deaf channel, DEAF, because we've got the 43. So he's got a deaf gate, not to mention. That's going to be painful. Conversations, are they going to be particularly fun? Not necessarily. Okay. So with the genetic imperative, when there is a compromise, you meet the other side, you think it's very exciting. There's a problem when we have a compromise. It's not just the other side, okay? Because they have already what you have. They're not attracted to you at all for that reason. So for her, it feels as if one isn't really loved. The love isn't really reciprocated. So compromise is difficult from the genetic point of view. Now, just from the point of view of the personality, that personality is carrying definition. The carrying the definition is saying, I'm not attracted to you. I have all of this. How come you're attracted to me? Now, not necessarily saying it to you in so many words, but the experiences over time. Remember, compromise shows up over time. The experiences over time will lend itself to this person feeling that issue of, I'm not really loved. They don't really see me for what I value or what I have to give. And when one feels as if one isn't really loved, or that the love isn't really reciprocated, that's a problem. That's a pain point. And guess what? It wasn't intentional. He's not doing it on purpose. It's just the mechanics. So Ross says one of the things that compromise brings is this feeling that one isn't really loved, one isn't really reciprocated, the love isn't really reciprocated. And it's not just they get to do it and you can't do anything about it, which is the generic description of compromise. So the generic description of compromise, the other person gets what you can't have. You don't have in that relationship. They get to experience the full expression of their channel, and you're just sitting there helpless, wishing that you could have that, and you can't. And that's why it's a pain point. Now, a little personal story from Ra. He says, I've lived with it for a very long time. To have compromise in my life as a 1762 or the 4037, these are the things that I've known all my life. And he says, I have this thing about compromises. I just don't go there, because if I go there, it leads to so many problems. I have a lot of 4037s in my life, and I'm a 40. We know that that's a common channel, so it would be the case. Every time, he says, I'm with a 4037 and there's a bargain, I'm compromised. There is really very little I can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it, and it's just the mechanics of it. It makes me think of the story that he would write contracts on napkins in restaurants. Didn't work out so well for him. Didn't have the whole channel. So he says, I've learned that this is an area where I can end up in a situation where I get very, very annoyed, irritated, angry. Remember, that's what we can use with the words, with the description for a manifestor. This is what compromises do. But the fact of the matter is, he says, I have not abandoned my 4037 relationships at all. The fact is, I've just learned not to attach myself to that zone. If I attach myself to it, then it becomes difficult, something that is difficult. And that difficultness is always an easy way to get to a point where you're annoyed and you don't want to deal with it anymore, and to hell with it, and so forth and so on. We know he was an individual integration, ego manifestor, with splenic authority. So we know it would be much easier for him to drop people like a hot potato and walk away, because there is no genetic imperative, working things out like a basic split would be. This is an independent assimilation process, and very individual nonetheless. This is what the dynamic was that he was dealing with. So he says, I have one gate. The moment I meet that whole channel, it's like my gate doesn't matter anyway. It doesn't. It can't really contribute anything. It can't impact in any way. It can't do anything but shut up or be still or whatever it is and accept the compromise. At the genetic level, what one is accepting is disinterest, and it creates all the problems. So you got somebody in your life that's a 1762. Aren't those some of the hardest people to argue with? No, they're fixed with their opinions and their thought processes, their acceptance of the pattern. They got it together. Your thought process doesn't matter to them. They can't see your way. They have their own way. So seeing is a good word to use when you're looking at compromise. They don't identify with your pattern recognition. They don't have the same experience if it's abstract on the other side. So they don't see eye to eye, or they don't know what each other are talking about, or they talk all over each other. Anytime you have compromises up here where we translate light into sound or word formulas. Compromise here, they're interrupting each other. I see it all the time when I have 4323s in my practice. I might be slow on the uptake and like start to say something. Might be also be the challenge with the internet too. But what to do? It is what it is. You just allow it, surrender to it, allow it to be what it is. And you treat it in that relationship. You look at that as dominance and you let go of trying to find your expression. Or let's say you're a projector and you're really insistent and you're really pushing, you're really bossy, triple split. I really have to get this in you to see this in me because I need you to recognize my value. That's going to bring more bitterness than you could possibly imagine if you try to force it down somebody's throat where you have a compromise. It won't work. Okay. Okay. Preachy today. Let's look at Princess Diana Charles, Prince Charles again. So think about the nature of the compromise for a generator. So here we have a generator design. When you're looking at your design, you're looking at it through the eyes of the generator, there's this dichotomy that's important to keep in mind, in that the red center is very powerful, enormously powerful. It is the energy resource of the world. It is what creates the frequency of what we live in, this generator world. It's not ours, non-sacral beings. So at the same time, there's this vulnerability of what isn't colored in. Vulnerability of what is open is also just as powerful. So in other words, the generators, despite their deep capacity to be able to generate the life force, they are at the same time the most deeply open to conditioning because there is no protective shield. It's not like they can, penetrate into one person only. They're absorbing and amplifying everybody that giant aura comes into contact with. The more giant the aura, 59, 6, 15, 5, those are big, big, big auric frequency fields. The more people they're going to be impacted by, influenced, you could say, by. All right. So Prince Charles and Princess Diana, if we go back for a moment and think about the not self themes of these types, with our generator and the open enveloping, we think about frustration. With our projector, penetrating and absorbing, we think about bitterness. If it's an energy projector, I often use the term resentment. If they're very not self, they will be resentful. So this theme for the generator being frustration, and that compromise, whatever compromise it happens to be, if he is compromised, we know he has one compromise. Here, his answers. There's going to be frustration on his part. Not simply the frustration that he can't get his way or that he can't meet halfway. It's a deeper frustration. It is the frustration that he isn't necessary. Doesn't that feel uncomfortable? Everybody wants to be wanted, loved, needed, right? But to feel like you're completely unnecessary, you're an appendage. I don't need your answers. I have my own. That's painful. So it's still painful. The thing that potentially ends any relationship, the death of the relationship, is the compromise. The compromise is the challenge. It's the upset. Okay. So here, logic and youthful folly, we can see being compromised. What do we have? We have Uranus, 4th line, 5th line, and Mercury, 6th line. Oh, we have resonance, at least, in the 6th line. May or may not make that a little less painful. It's the sun. Ouch. Okay. If you're a generator and you've been unaware, let's say not operating correctly, not following your authoritative sacral process, you're in a relationship, and that relationship in which you have a compromise with the other, your partner or child or parent or whoever, you're going to take in the conditioning. You're going to be taking in that conditioning. And the compromise, that conditioned compromise, can be really, really painful. So understanding the way the aura operates, remember, she's penetrating into him. He has no protection. So the fact that you're dealing with openness is that there's this openness to all the connections in all the ways that it doesn't operate in the other aura types. The generator gets penetrated by this projector, and it can be a challenge. It can be an upset or painful. Now, compromise brings heavy, heavy things into the unconscious, something that you're maybe not aware of. This one is unconscious, right? For him especially. So you've got a part of a channel, the other person has the whole channel, and the I don't need you thing happens. So it doesn't serve her any purpose for him to try and spout the light of his answers at her. Doesn't serve any purpose. And yet it's part of him. It's part of his life's work. It's his unconscious core essence. It's like saying, Ra says, I've got 2 arms. I don't need yours. Okay. So it's just like extraneous part of you. And for that generator, that is really deeply frustrating. Got the picture? You can use this template to talk about any type whatsoever. Just change the word frequencies for the aura. So let's think about the projector then. This is focused and absorbing. So it's focused. It meets compromise and it absorbs that compromise. It takes it right in and it focuses on it. So what that means is that the compromise is immediately a problem because it's focused on it and can't get away from it, no matter that there is balance and everything else, or that there is ease. So 2 projectors in compromise, still a problem, still an issue. So most likely what happens to the projector is they get stuck on the compromise in that place because it's very, very difficult. Quote, compromise is very, very difficult for projectors because they end up being focused on it. They don't see the forest for the trees. There's this compromise that they see. There's just this compromise that they see, unquote, from Ra. So you can see the moment that there is a compromise for a projector, whatever they're focused on, that identity, they can't escape that aspect. It's just there. Thorn or a splinter, something that's simply there. It can be just agonizing, as we looked at with her Venus. And now you can never get rid of it. You can't. It's not possible. You can't make it better. You can't change the other person. It's their definition. And this is precisely the way that they're wired. There's nothing you can do. Ra calls it the petty tyrant. It's always there. It's a problem. It's a challenge. It's an upset to that partner who is being compromised. So one of the dilemmas of the not self is when you say you have to compromise with your partner and you always have to do this thing because your partner has the whole thing, you give that to the not self in a reading, and the not self will feed on that. Not only is it going to feed on that, ultimately it's going to fulfill the destiny of what compromise always brings. Compromise always brings a tension that can destroy a relationship, always. And so what do you do in the not self? I'm going to avoid any relationship that has any compromise, period, says the mind, because I don't want my relationship to be destroyed. I don't want to bother. Please don't do that. Don't let your clients do that. Don't do that yourself. Any relationship can work if both partners are operating in alignment. But yet, as we know, most are not. So this is why there is no way we can do a software, even though people have attempted to. Ra was adamant, no software. It has to be an authoritative process between both real live parties. Now, this knowledge provides no cure. It doesn't provide anything to help with the compromise as far as the knowledge is concerned, the mechanics are concerned. What Ra says is that we lock into the other. We really lock in. When you're in a geometry with someone and you have to deal with that compromise, breath by breath, day by day, the only thing that helps is awareness, nothing else. So if you can educate your clients to be aware that the other person isn't doing it on purpose, that they need some other source of expression with someone else, now we have some potential solutions. They have to be aware first and foremost who they are, what their design is, how they can operate in alignment through their strategy and authority. So you just imagine what that's like. Every time projectors are focused on the identity, they can never escape the compromise. They can't. It's always there. And this bitterness that they're not really seen or not really valued or they're not really appreciated, All of that is created by and feeds off of the compromise. So if we go back to Monica and Vincent Castle with the manifestor and a generator, the manifestor and compromise breeds anger, and the anger just pumps up the repulsion and the repelling mechanism. The compromise for a manifestor is a spontaneous reason of why they say, I quit. Very simple. They're closed. Different kind of aura. And yeah, the connection takes place. And yes, there is this fundamental generic quality in the way in which it works, but it's different depending on the auric frequency. So Ross says he would always have these moments with couples where he would wait to see what the hot points were, because then he'd go through the individual designs in front of each other, doing overviews for each other, and then really having a glimpse of how he looked at each of them having a glimpse of how he looked at each of them, and then go right straight to the dilemma, to the compromise. And the moment you hit those compromise buttons, you feel all the stored anger, resentment, annoyance, bitterness, those kinds of things. And there's nothing to do about it. So people would look at him and say, okay, now fix it. What do we do about this? And he says, well, gee, sorry, there's no fixing of the compromise. It's not possible. It doesn't work. So there's nothing you can do but surrender to it. And if I have short clients, just like they don't have a lot of money or they don't have a lot of time, whatever the case may be, they just want to know where the problem is, how to mitigate the challenges, the problems. If you go straight to the compromise, you will get a major reward for your time and energy involved. Now, remember, both of them need to have had an overview first, at least know how to live as themselves before any of this stuff isn't just mind candy and more justification in the not self mind to say, okay, I quit. I can't make this work. She just told me there's nothing I can do, right? So remember not to take their authority, help them take back their authority for themselves. So to transcend this difficulty is about education. Ross says you really do have to be aware to accept that this is your trajectory, your geometry, your destiny, your karma, whatever it is, to have this petty tyrant in your life, the stick that keeps you aware, the stick in the relationship. Okay, so here's the reflector. When you look at a reflector, this is the master of compromise. They have to do it all the time. So every time they meet definition in somebody, a channel, they meet the potential of compromise. He says it can lead to such deep bitterness. That's interesting. He says, my earliest teaching to reflectors was trust the moon. Wait for the cycle. Don't trust the forces that are around you. Don't trust that moment. You're always compromising. You're always under pressure. So we know they have to wait for their lunar cycle to get clear, to find their knowing, their sudden knowing. So for the reflector, that resistant and sampling aura, we know that's very different. So resistant and sampling aura is quite similar in many ways to the manifestor. Quite similar, but the resistant is not closed. The compromise is something that they dabble in, but it doesn't affect them so deeply as the other types. Reflectors and manifestors are much more impacted by the daily program in terms of conditioning than they are by the other in that sense. So it's not to diminish the fact that those connections do take place between them and others. It's just that the way that their auras operate relative to the other is that it limits the level of conditioning, the depth of the conditioning, the adherence of the conditioning, because it can't get through. They have a protective aura. It's a very different story.